House Speaker John Boehner weighed in on the sequester on the Wall Street Journal's op-ed page today. Here's an excerpt. Let's put that up on the screen. Having first proposed and demanded the sequester, it would make sense that the president lead the effort to replace it. Unfortunately, he has put forth no detailed plan that can pass Congress, and the Senate, controlled by his Democratic allies, hasn't even voted on a solution, let alone passed one. Strong words. Editorial board member Steve Moore joins me now from Washington. Steve, Boehner makes the point that House Republicans have passed two plans with what Boehner says are common sense cuts and reforms that protect national security. Is the focus finally shifting here to Democrats in the White House?
Well, you know, the problem, Mary, is that the president has been all over the map on the sequester. The sequester cuts were originally his idea back in 2010 and 2011 when they couldn't reach an agreement on the debt ceiling agreement. Then exactly a year ago, Mary, he famously said that he would veto any attempt to get rid of the sequester. And then, of course, yesterday he said that it would be Armageddon for the country if we let the sequester go through. Now, the Republicans are very frustrated in dealing with the president. The Republican position, I think, makes a lot of sense, which is, look, we can find a better way to cut the spending, but it's not going to involve tax increases, given the fact that we've just raised taxes twice this year, one with Obamacare and one with the fiscal cliff. And that's where the standoff is. Republicans say they're not going to raise taxes, and Obama says that he wants to turn off the sequester by raising taxes on the rich.
Steve, I don't want to paint the Democrats with such a broad brush. Are there Democrats in the Senate who don't want to raise taxes, who would do a deal with Republicans if the White House backed off?
Oh, sure there are, Mary. I mean, as you know, there are about 8 to 10 what I call red state Democrats up for re-election in 2014. These are Democrats who need to move to the middle politically for political survival's sake. And yes, absolutely, they want a more rational solution. By the way, I should say this, Mary, I actually don't think a sequester is such a bad way to cut spending. I mean, this is what businesses do. If their revenues are down and they have to cut their expenditures, they go to the agencies and they go to their program officers and say, look, we got to cut everything by 4 or 5%. Why can't government do that?
You know, it's a great point, and Boehner makes that point in the op-ed. He says, no one should be talking about raising taxes, basically, while government is paying people to play video games and giving people free cell phones. Steve, that's not just a throwaway line. Those things are actually happening. Is there room, though, to cut enough of those extraneous programs to really make a dent in our budget deficit?
You know, I've come to the view that the Republicans should be, rather than talking about replacing the sequester, I think their rhetoric should be sequester plus. In other words, I think we should do the sequester, absolutely, and then if we can get other program savings, which there are plenty of, and if we can make reforms to entitlements, we need to do that. I mean, let's face it, we've got a $1.1 trillion deficit. We've got to do all of the above in terms of bringing this spending down. By the way, it's really interesting, isn't it, Mary, that here we have an $85 billion cut that's supposed to happen this year. President Obama, in his State of the Union speech, endorsed about $83 billion of new spending in that speech alone. I just think Republicans don't believe, and I don't believe this president is at all serious about wanting to cut anything in government.
Steve, do you see this op-ed as really drawing a line in the sand? Boehner is saying to the president, okay, it's time to tell us what you want to do. We're not negotiating anymore.
Yeah, the problem, Mary, and look, I like John Boehner a lot. I interviewed him, as you know, at the beginning of the year. I'm not so sure how much credibility the Republicans have in these threats because, as you know, they back down on the fiscal cliff. They back down on the debt ceiling. You know, a lot of people in this town think that the Republicans, when push come to shove, may back down here again. I hope they don't. I think our fiscal future really depends on sticking to their guns here and say, this is very reasonable. Mr. President, if you want to turn this thing off, you have to come up with alternative cuts.
So the Republicans sticking to their guns, asking the Democrats to come up with some plan, something. Editorial board member Steve Moore, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mary.